What's up, guys? Back in the shop to give you an update on Mr. Jordan Newman's first gen here. We've made some progress on it, and I want to show you guys where we're at with it. So as I've stated before, this is the engine out of JP's truck. It is a sleeve 6.7, and I had to fit it and all of the intercooler and radiator stuff from JP's truck into here. So the first order of business was to get rid of most of the factory core support. It is not 100% finished yet. There will be a little bit more that comes out of it when I get to the intercooler piping over in this section, and same on this side. I will take a hole saw and cut those to clear the intercooler piping when we get to that point. But I've been working on getting the intercooler and the radiator mounted, and everything, the intercooler and the radiator all mounts to what you see right here. And I will put it all together and show it to you guys so it all makes a little bit more sense. But essentially, this is the bottom mount of the radiator, of the intercooler. So the intercooler will bolt here and here from underneath the truck. So it sits on this, and you'll see where it ends up when I put the intercooler in and all that and put the grill on it. But it's basically dead center of the grill. So it should get all of the airflow that it needs to get, and then some. And then the intercooler actually bolts to these, and these just slide over here. And I will explain why this is set up like this when we get to the radiator installed portion. But pretty much the intercooler and the radiator mounting is done, other than just finalizing the exact height of the radiator. I'm waiting to do that until I finish putting the engine exactly where it needs to go. I didn't want to put the engine where it needed to go first until I made sure that I could fit everything up front. So now that I know the intercooler and radiator are going to fit, now I know about where I can move the engine to and not interfere with anything. So that's the next project that I'm going to do. And then while we're looking at it, before I put all the other stuff back in, the belt routing task, I've pretty much got that figured out. This pulley here used to be here on JP's setup, and like I said in the last video, JP's truck doesn't have power steering. This one does, so that totally threw the whole belt routing off. And there's not really anybody that runs a Waterman with that CP3 and that factory power steering pump, so we had to do some stuff a little different. So move this idler pulley down to there, and then I actually made a mount and added an idler pulley here. And I'll show you guys the mount that I made, because pretty much you can't see any of it once it's all bolted up. So essentially the belt routing is going to be just like you see it here, and then I'm going to add a tensioner right here, so that way the CP3 has a good wrap on it, power steering pump will be wrapped well, and the crank will be wrapped really well. Really, it should probably be better than it was on JP's truck. I haven't decided yet if we're going to try to use a Cummins tensioner here, or I'm thinking about doing a manual adjustable one with a tie rod, so that way we can set the tension to whatever we want it. Obviously this isn't the right belt, it's too big, but I just threw it on there for checking purposes and clearances and whatnot. So I'm going to throw the intercooler and radiator in this thing, and then I'll explain to you how we made the radiator quick removal. Okay, so intercooler and radiator is in, and you can see about where it's at. Should catch plenty of air there. I'll throw the grill on it there in a second and show you guys. One of the problems about doing big intercoolers, big front mount air coolers in a first gen is the fact that the secondary hood latch usually hits. And so like if you get like a second gen style intercooler and bolt it in here, you won't be able to use your secondary latch, and so you have to do hood pins or something, and we just really did not want to do that on this. So I wanted to make sure that the intercooler was up high enough to where it was catching as much air as possible, but I wanted to make sure that we could still use the secondary hood latch. And since I've cut out so much of this core support, it's really flimsy now. So our buddy Chris Maston does all of our aluminum welding work for us on this thing. He is going to weld us a threaded bung here, and I'll make a simple little bracket to bolt to the bottom of this, so the intercooler will actually tie the core support back in together. In the event that the hood did try to come up, it wouldn't just rip the whole core support off with it. And then on the radiator, you can see it's kind of tight quarters in here. It ended up actually being a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. And we could probably change the belt on this thing and get to the balancer and everything just the way it is. But in the event that we are at the track, or Jordan's at the track, and he needs to work on something and the radiator is in his way, the way I did this mount setup here is this tube bolts to the radiator tabs, and then it slides down in to the main tube welded to the frame rail. And this will just pin in, so that way the radiator ever can't really move up and down. And then on the other side, it is the exact same way. There's a tube mount that slides down into the mount on the frame, bolts to the radiator. So this radiator will actually just pull straight out. If you're needing to pull this radiator out, all we will do is we will put two quick disconnect -16 fittings on the coolant side. So say you're at the track, you want to pull the radiator really quick, or if you're just working on servicing it yourself at the house, you'll quick disconnect these fittings, so no tools involved, and then this radiator will actually slide straight up. I'll see if I can get a video of me pulling it up there. So no tools or anything, just pick up on both ends, slide it all the way out, put it back in, line it up in the holes in the tubes, slide it in, radiator's back in, hook up your disconnects, go. So now that the radiator and intercooler is pretty much done, pretty much figured out where it's going to be, just a little tidying up on a couple loose ends just to get it all lined out. Man, you can see how close everything is. The closest thing to this radiator here is just the Waterman pump, and really it's fine where it's at, but like I said before, this engine needs to go over that way about 3/8 of an inch anyways, and that'll help everything out there. The next thing that I was going to do, but I can't do it just yet, is the intercooler piping. So we have the piping from JP's truck, and it's actually going to work out perfect. This intercooler was basically in the exact same spot in JP's truck. It was just mounted where the bumper would be on a first gen. The way that a third gen works out, it was just mounted lower, which works out great because we can use every bit of his old intercooler piping and just shorten it. So the distance between here and here is shorter because the radiator or the intercooler is up higher. So all we have to do is chop the intercooler piping, shorten it however much we need it, and Maston will weld it back up for us. So all the nitrous bung locations will be able to stay the same. We'll be able to use every flange, every bit of intercooler tubing. So that's going to save Jordan a ton of money. It's going to save him a bunch of time, and it's going to save me a bunch of time. Okay, so here is the grill sitting on the truck as it would be if it was mounted, and you can see that we have most of the intercooler completely showing through the grill. The grill inserts still fit, still plenty of room in there, and still enough room to get intercooler piping clamp on both sides without getting into the grill any. So I know that Jordan's gonna be really happy about that. That was one of the big things that he wanted, is he really wanted to run grill inserts on this truck, and I don't blame him. It looks really good with the grill inserts. He's trying to keep the theme of truck here. He's really wanting to make this thing look like a real deal truck as much as possible. I won't say sleeper, because he's not necessarily going for a sleeper look. He's just going for a truck look. and first gen trucks had grill inserts. So happy that we were able to squeeze all that in there, fit it all in between the engine. And now my next task on this thing will be to probably gonna have to pull the engine back out of the truck. It needs to go down a little bit. I'll raise the truck up and I'll show you underneath of there why that needs to happen. But engine probably needs to go down just a little bit. I'm gonna try to not set the engine down as much as possible. When you have really bad weight bias, it's not a bad thing to keep the weight up front as high as possible, so that way it'll weight transfer better when you have a really bad weight bias. So, but at the end of the day, this thing has to fit in here, so that's just going to be the goal. It has to fit, so we will do whatever we have to do to make this thing fit. It's really close to fitting now. It's just mainly the transmission is the big thing. So I'm going to go underneath the truck and show you what I'm talking about. This is some real production level lighting we got here. So when you put the transmission in the truck the way it is right now, one, the engine adapter plate is almost touching, you can't really see it, but almost touching the floor pan. There's about a 1/4 inch gap from it, and that's really not enough. You can't run a flex plate shield with that little amount of clearance, and the transmission barely goes in, and I don't believe that it would even go in with a converter sticking out of it, because the converter sticks out about 3/4 of an inch, so you got to keep that in mind. The corners up here, you can see where this floor pan meets the firewall, and that lip there, I had to do this on my first gen too. It all needs cut out. Not to the point in which you lose the integrity of the floor pan meeting the firewall, but it needs to be cut down for sure in the corners. It needs to be rounded up here a lot more in the tops, and that will allow us better fitment of the transmission. And then that's really this floor pan. That the transmission would go in the way it is now if it wasn't for the engine adapter plate being so close to that floor pan up there. That's technically the firewall, but it looks like the floor pan. It tries to hit on everything else under here to try to make it go up in there. So the engine needs to come down, not a lot. I'm going to try to keep it no more than a 1/2 inch down. I don't want to move this weight down any more than I have to. And then it needs to move over to the left to accommodate some stuff in the front. And I got to be careful on that, because the further left I go, the closer the starter gets to the frame rail, and the tighter it's going to get to the floor pan up here, which is the same deal on mine. It's really, really tight on that side. Transmission comes in and out of mine pretty easy, so I'm going to shoot for the same goal on this one. So in order for me to move this engine down, I am going to have to cut the engine cross member, because as you can see, Jordan already notched it when he put this engine in, and there's really not much clearance there. And if this thing is going to have to go down a 1/2 inch, it's just not going to happen. So what Jordan and I are deciding on is, if we're going to cut the entire cross member out and do a tubular cross member that may or may not be bolted in, or just notch the cross member the way we need to. That's how it is in my truck. It's basically just cut and re-welded. But I think that we could probably save a little bit of weight if we did a tube, and really I'd like to do the tube if we can do a bolt-in tube. So that way, if he ever had to pull the oil pan off of this thing for whatever reason, roll some bearings in it, just check torque on things, whatever, who knows what can and will happen, he'd be able to droop the axle at full droop, and then pull a tubular crossmember out and drop the pan and be able to get to the bottom of the engine. I don't know 100% if that's going to work yet. I have to droop the axle and take some measurements because of the pickup tube. The pickup tube hangs down a lot further than you think. That's why this boss is bumped out like this on the oil pan, and it might not be able to get the pan out even with the crossmember out of the way. But I'm going to measure it. I'm going to find out for sure. And if we can, that's what we're gonna do. And then we're gonna do some different style engine mounts. This was like a factory style engine mount and it worked great, but if we do the tube, I'm gonna get rid of that cross member where it bolts in, and I'm all about serviceability, so I got an idea for some engine mounts that I think will make this thing really easy to pull the motor in and out of. So that will be our next plan. That will be our next task of action, is to get the motor out of this thing. Oh, let me show you the, you can't really see that good, but that is the brace that holds the idler pulley in. The idler pulley is going to see some downward force just due to the nature of how the belt is wrapped around it. So I wasn't comfortable just relying on that front cover bolt. So I wanted to make sure that I had a really nice stout brace for it. And I think it turned out really nice. You can still get the crank sensor in and out. So yeah, that is our next goal. Get the engine out of this thing, start cutting away, and stay tuned for the next one, guys.